Jeff, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Welcome to another Powered by Volta episode. Do you know where your lithium is? I think this episode will provide a big relief to many battery scientists out there as we discuss, bear with me, laser ablation, laser ionization, time of flight, mass spectrometry, and how it could revolutionize material characterization. Hear from Jeff Williams, the founder and CEO of Exum Instruments, as we take a deep dive into what the solution could mean for our industry. We hope you enjoy. Let's start with you, first of all. What is your story and how and why did you establish Exum Instruments?
Yeah, so my background was geologist turned cosmochemist turned analytical chemist. I was a rock climber who, was out in nature all the time climbing and decided I wanted to learn more about rocks and went into geology and found out that I kind of had a knack for science and math that I didn't know that I had. Had really good professors along the way. This was at Florida State University. And from that, I was able to make my way into a lab that did a lot of work in cosmochemistry. So a lot of work with meteorites and early solar system formation at the National High Field Lab in Tallahassee, Florida. And from there, I got to really use all of the analytical instruments that are available. So whether this is mass spectrometers to other spectroscopy techniques to kind of everything in between, and kind of worked in a clean lab environment and both loved and hated it kind of all at the same time. I ended up doing my graduate work at University of New Mexico, still staying on the cosmochemistry path. And at some point, I became disillusioned with academia, as it were, and decided that, I really wanted to go out into the private sector, and I'd always kind of had an entrepreneurial itch. And from my experience in the lab, I realized that a lot of instruments were just kind of stuck in their, late 90s, early 2000s. There hadn't been a lot of, changes, both from the hardware and the software side of things. And what I was dealing with these, meteorites that were precious materials or other rocks as well, is the best way to analyze anything solid was to put it into a liquid. So to do a bunch of acid digestion. And that was, still true up until the point to where we created the mass specs, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And I wanted a way where you could take that solid sample, get the entire periodic table, and most importantly, have an experience of getting your data that was like using an iPhone, so that anybody could do it. You didn't need me as an analytical chemist to fight the machine every day to actually get a number. Instead of taking weeks to get something that's meaningful, let's let it take minutes. And so that's where I started to really think about, well, how would I create something different? So I decided to drop out of my PhD program with a master's and start building mass spectrometers in my garage.
Wow. So literally from the garage story.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, exactly. We would go to government auctions and start buying parts here and there and finally piece some stuff together and experimented a lot and kind of converged onto the solution that became the mass box.
This is, again, another kind of take charge first, which is really nice. We're at episode, 32, 33. And it's so nice that we're having still firsts on the episode, which is, a credit to the ecosystem that we've built in the battery space. So spectrometry, spectrometers, super interesting. I've got a really good friend who does microbiology. So they work with them, but this is obviously very different. So I'm unfamiliar. So yeah, kind of give us a bit of a very kind of base level intro to the technology.
Sure. Yeah. So what we're going to be talking about today is specifically a mass spectrometer. So we're going to be making a spectrum of mass. And really the idea, and we're going to be talking inorganically, right? So what you just mentioned about your friend, those are a lot of organic spectrometers, still same idea, but, actually full compounds. We're going to be talking about elements, right? So we're going to talk about lithium and iron and all of these things today. And so there's kind of like three fundamental parts to a mass spectrometer. You need a source. So you need material that gets ionized. And so once it's ionized, we can talk to it with an electric field, right? So we can push it, we can pull it, we can form it into a beam. And then we need a way to separate out the mass. So some way of either making the flight paths diverge or separate them out in time or whatever it may be. And that's called the mass filter. So there's a lot of different ways to go about this. This can be in magnetic fields where the ions are flying through and they slightly diverge. This can be in something called a quadrupole, which is basically an RF system with 4 poles where the ions orbit through it and only one mass makes it all the way through. Everything else gets thrown out. Or what we do for the mass box is we use what's called time of flight mass spectrometry. And you could think about this as if you had a soccer ball and a bowling ball and you kick them with the same energy, the soccer ball is going to go much faster, much further, right? And so if we kicked lithium and uranium with the same energy, the lithium is going to fly very fast. And so if we were to let the lithium fly and then detect it at some amount of time, and we were to look at it in a time axis, we'd see lithium. Then a little bit later, we'd see carbon, iron, and then all the way out to uranium. So that's called time of flight. And so that's the third part, is the detection, is we need a way to turn that ion into a signal. And so that's, there's lots of different detector methods, but you can imagine them just hitting a plate, and then we record that digitally.
It's really hard to give a really base level explanation of something so complex. So I appreciate that. And the bowling ball, football analogy is perfect. That's really interesting.
Oh yeah, I said soccer ball. Sorry about that. I know.
Now football, soccer ball, I got it. Either one, similar, isn't it? Similar. Certainly won't be kicking a bowling ball. So with this, obviously you mentioned you kind of dropped out of your PhD, finalized with a master's, and was working from your garage to kind of get this off the ground. You obviously identified technology and an issue in the market, a need in the market. So let's talk a little bit more about that need and what you think this is gonna be a game changer for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess going back to the explanation I just said of like what a mass spectrometer is and kind of where's the innovation of what we're doing and why did I decide to do this. It goes back to that statement around the best way to analyze something solid was to digest it in a bunch of acid, do a bunch of chemistry, and then put it as a liquid into one of these mass spectrometers. And so I wanted to, take it so you could put something solid and analyze it. So we developed a new technology, which we call LOLI. So laser ablation, laser ionization. And so what that does is we take one laser and we focus it, and it's an ultra fast laser, so picosecond scale, so very fast pulse with high energy. And what that does is it ablates a little bit of material on the sample surface, and it creates a neutral particle cloud. So you can imagine like if you were like drilling into concrete, kind of creates that dust cloud. That's kind of what's happening, but the laser is doing it on a very small spot. And that neutral particle cloud is mostly formed of atoms. We kind of optimize the laser for that. So kind of the exact representation of what was in the sample as a solid is now basically in a gas phase right above the sample surface. And we can take another laser and we strip off the electron of all those neutral atoms. So that's how we ionize. So we're doing it right above the sample surface. Basically we excite the electron and we excite it again. And it's so far away from its nucleus that now we can basically pull the ion away very quickly. And so that's the core of our technology, is this LOLI technique for how we remove the material and how we ionize it. Then we send it through some more just traditional ion optics with some cleverness that we've done into a time of flight mass spectrometer. And what that allows for is we can do the entire periodic table because we're not having a bunch of acids and matrices that we're putting it through. We don't have limitations on our ionization source, so we can analyze carbon at the same time we're analyzing uranium or lithium. And we're doing all of this in vacuum. I think that's a really crucial part as well, because obviously lithium, loves air, even though we don't like it to love air. So we want to keep all of this in an inert environment. So we can actually, for batteries, put this in our sample chamber in a air-free transfer vessel, pulls under vacuum, and we're able to analyze everything natively without, exposing it to oxygen and all sorts of other things. That's kind of the core technology of what we based everything around, is take something solid, get the full periodic table, and deliver it in an experience that anybody can use.
The benefits, I mean, when you and I were first speaking, the benefits are really fascinating from an R&D and manufacturing perspective, speaking specifically about batteries. And I thought it was, really interesting. And I thought, why has this never been done before? So yeah, answer me that.
Yeah. So the technology I just talked about, it had been done in pieces. right? So like a lot of great things in the world that have been done, kind of in the 80s. And basically there were people that had done parts of the laser ablation or parts of the laser ionization with different techniques. And there had obviously been time of flight mass spectrometry that started to really take off as well. But none of those three pieces could really come together from a lot of different limitations, from the advancements of how good our lasers were at the time to how fast our time of flights were, and all these sorts of technological limitations that the industry kind of steered in different directions. So I was able to kind of come and pick up the pieces of like these three different ideas and put them together and say, hey, this would actually work really well together and give us all of these advantages. And then just so happens that it has a really big advantage for something like the battery space, like you were just mentioning. There really isn't another technique out there that can do what we do, and especially when it comes to lithium.
Well, let's talk a bit more about that in terms of what it means for the battery world. Let's focus on R&D to begin with. I was reading about lithium mapping, the depth profiling, as well as identifying the amount of quantity in the sample. So yeah, from an R&D perspective, what does this mean for the battery world?
Yeah, so for the first time, we're giving these battery researchers, both and kind of every part of the lithium life cycle, the ability to see their lithium, right? It's a very difficult element to measure by traditional techniques. So a lot of times you'll see these beautiful images made by e-beam techniques like a SEM or something like that. And you're kind of by inference saying, I think this is what phase my lithium is. I think I'm seeing it here, but you're never quite sure or positive because you can't directly measure it. Or you're taking your battery and you're digesting it in a bunch of acid, like I talked about, and you're measuring it by a technique that's just going to tell you your bulk lithium. And what you just alluded to, the kind of spatial analysis of what we're able to do, is because if we go back to that description of the laser ablation, we're using one laser to make a spot, remove material there. Well, now we can move the sample over, hit it again, move the sample over, hit it again. So it's like an old CRT TV that used to scan across and make an image. We can actually do that with the laser. We can scan the sample under, take 10,000 shots over this area that you're interested in. And we can then make at every single pixel a full mass spectrum and say, I want to look at lithium. And you can see, oh, do I have hot spots? That might be where my lithium's plating out here. Is my lithium homogeneously distributed? Or can I keep going down and create a three-dimensional image of, is my lithium homogeneous through the entire anode or whatever it may be, or maybe after charge cycling, is it staying and looking the same? Something that you've never been able to see before. That's really the power that we're enabling just on the lithium side of things. Not to mention the fact that we have this, n-dimensional data set of a mass spectrum. We can get every element. So if you want to know how the cobalt that you put in here is affecting the system, you can measure that. You can actually look exactly at your chemistry in 3 dimensions. That's really one of the big enabling factors here. And what's important for us is that it's not just for traditional lithium technologies as well. This is, for solid states. This is also for other types of batteries, like sodium batteries we've been doing work on, or even traditional lead acid batteries. There's everything that is being developed right now has an advantage to seeing your chemistry. And that's what we really enable, is understanding where your lithium is, understanding where your sodium, your iron, whatever element it may be.
I was reading one of your case studies and I was fascinated by it because it mentioned that I think it was a lithium NMC cathode was there was some contamination, and that was due to transit because it was in the same compartment. That must happen all the time. And if we're going to go into kind of manufacturing, unless you're going to specifically test for a certain element, am I right in thinking the mass box it tests everything, without you telling it to? So I thought that was really interesting.
That's exactly right. Yeah, no, it's a really good example. Is most times if you're going to be performing an analytical session on something, you're telling the machine what you want to look for. You're saying, hey, I want to measure my iron, nickel, manganese, whatever it might be in the sample. But you never think to analyze tungsten because you're like, well, why do I care about tungsten? Well, it turns out tungsten's a big contaminant that you would never know is there unless you were asking to look for it. And the mass box gives you everything, whether you like it or not. So, we have tons of fun conversations all the time with production environment where it's like, hey, by the way, did you guys know that you have a ton of tantalum or tungsten in your samples? And they're like, no, we don't. It's like, well, you do. And so it's always this kind of like, surprise for some people too, when they've never asked to look for something and we get to show them what else is going on in their system. And that's kind of part of the fun too, is that people get to think about their processes a little differently, their best practices for sample handling, as you just mentioned, like, hey, actually that's causing contamination. And we can see the contamination now because, we can see this little hot spot in iron. And if we look at all of the other chemistry at that exact spot, turns out it's a stainless steel. So we have stainless steel coming from our production line somewhere. Okay, what parts are stainless steel that this thing is touching? So you can start to really diagnose back using the chemistry of what's happening.
I've never tested a battery before. I'll hold my hands up. But in terms of what your technology could do, the mass box, versus what's actually out there right now, what would a battery scientist, battery engineer be doing to get the same results? How long would it take?
Yeah, and this is, I think one of the things I want to highlight as well is we are right now trying to work with a lot of people in order to cross-correlate our technique and our data with other techniques as well, because it's really important that we fit into the workflow of what's already happening. And so there's a lot of great testing technologies out there, whether it's, on the kind of electrical side of things or on kind of the finished product side of things. And we just fit into the chemistry. And so I wanted to put that out there as anybody listening to this podcast and you want to, correlate your lithium or charge states with other data that you have, we really want to work together in this full ecosystem. But I think to answer the second part of your question is like, how long would it take if, you decided you were making some new battery chemistry and you want to measure the lithium in your sample? It depends on how you want to do it. If you want to just get bulk lithium, it's a matter of sending it out to a third-party lab. It's probably going to cost you a couple $1,000, take 3 to 4 weeks to get it done, and you're going to get one data point back, right? You can say, this anode had 4 weight % lithium in it, or whatever it might be, right? Plus or minus some amount. And that might be useful to you. But if you want to know, okay, how much lithium do I have distributed in this volume and how is it distributed? There's not any other way that you can do that right now other than the mass box. And the mass box can do it quantitatively. We can actually look at every pixel and quantitatively give you an answer. The only other way to kind of get about this is to use techniques that are, $1 million plus machines, maybe even getting close to $2 million machines. And they're going to look at 10 micron by 10 micron square area and will maybe give you a sense of what's happening, but not being able to do it quantitatively and just in such a small area. Whereas we can look at 3 inches by 3 inches. So we can put a whole anode in there and map the entire anode in 3 dimensions.
So insane time saving. For the mass box, how long would it take?
Yeah, so for the mass box, I think the case study that you were referring to, which is available on our website, those images that were created probably took on the order of tens of minutes to create those images, right? And so it scales as how big of an image you want to make. Obviously, you can end up doing like an hour session, but still you're talking, intraday analysis for a lot of data versus weeks and weeks of time.
I'm not a battery engineer, but I can maybe sense battery engineers thinking, whoa, this is going to save me a lot of time. So that was fascinating. You mentioned some advancements in terms of what you may be looking to do to improve and things. How are you looking to progress the technology overall to maybe get to full industry solution scale?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's something right now. Exum Instruments batteries weren't on our radar probably 18 months ago, 2 years ago. Really, it was through a partnership of Stanford and the Slack National Laboratory with William Chu and Johanna Wecker. We were able to really understand how this technology fit into the space, right? So we actually have an instrument over at Stanford now, and we've been doing a ton of data on so many chemistries. I can't even keep up with all the stuff that they're doing over there, which is an important point, is that, we're chemistry agnostic. As long as it's solid and flat, we can analyze it. But that being said is, there is a lot of cross-correlation that we want to do. We want to get into this ecosystem, work with people understand our true and full value proposition in this space. So, right now we really are open to collaboration. We're excited to hear about what people think this could be useful for. We obviously have case studies and publications and presentations at conferences that are happening now with our technology, which is great. But it's really about driving towards, like you said, industry solution. So how do we go from, which is our sweet spot right now, is on the kind of material development, battery development side of things, to the process engineering, then ultimately all the way to the, the fab, as it were, right? And we want to climb all the way up that chain of the value proposition. And it's an important thing of the way that we see this instrument going into space is it is the full lithium life cycle, as it were. So it's all the way, from the R&D to the engineering to the failure analysis, like you just mentioned, and then to production. And we can go up or downstream of that as well. We can be a tool that's being used on mine sites to measure lithium ore, or downstream, we can be used for on the recycling side to identify the chemistries more specifically so that you can have optimized recycling or whatever it may be. So for us right now, it's really is about, really defining and limiting the use cases to the most important issues that we can touch and we can tackle. So there's almost nobody that we say no to right now. If you have an interesting idea or thought or just want to learn more, please reach out. We'd love to talk with you, to collaborate, and ultimately make sure that we're providing value to this space.
And where do you see the opportunity for this technology from a geographical perspective, in terms of where has the most need for it? Geographically, maybe business maturity, what you're thinking specifically for batteries, of course.
Yeah, I think there's an obvious answer of, the cell manufacturers. So geographically, like Korea is obviously a big target for us, and going over there, and we're starting to work in that space now and ultimately get into a cell manufacturing line. And we have really good data that suggests that we'll be able to kind of stitch up a lot of issues in the production facilities in order to gain a lot of, improvements in loss, right? Like lithium manufacturing is one of the worst processes from like an efficiency perspective. Like the amount of loss that's generated is just insane. So if we can help with 1 to 5% of that, like that's huge numbers. And we're already getting a lot of indication that we can. So I think, geographically and maturity, like getting all the way to a cell manufacturer is super important for us. And we're doing work here domestically in the US with cell manufacturers as well, which is super exciting. And I think internationally, though, there's obviously just a ton of money and research going into what does the next generation battery look like. So beyond what gigafactories are being built for today, beyond what the cell manufacturers are working on today, what's going to take us, another order of magnitude of improvement, right? And that's where we also fit in super well, being able to give you a completely new dimension at looking at what you're generating and creating. And so that's really geographic agnostic at this point. Everybody's doing it, every country in the world. But from the opportunity perspective, that's where we see, a huge opportunity is getting things out of the labs and into pre-production fabs, all the way up into, accelerating its potential into the marketplace.
This is so it's actually a new element. It's this episode is powered by Volta. Of course, you're part of the Volta Foundation. You joined it recently. A question I like to ask to new members is why? Kind of what was the main reason you joined the foundation?
Yeah, Volta has been great already. The main reason why we've joined Volta, though, is for the network. All right, so it's everything that I just described that we're trying to learn, to understand, to connect with. There can be always a challenge, a little bit of a wall of breaking into a new market and understanding who are the key players, what are they doing, why would they care about this, what problems are they facing. And Volta kind of serves as this one-stop shop for, hey, come into here, we can get your message out to a lot of people that are key in the industry. And you can also hear from a lot of those key people in the industry what problems and challenges and struggles they're trying to solve, and learn a lot about how we can be part of that solution. So I think that's been key for what we're doing. And one of those things too is also being able to go to something like the battery show, and we're doing a pop-up at the Volta Lounge, and we're sponsoring a happy hour with them. So if you're at the battery show, please come by. It'll be really cool. Come chat with us. And if you want to shoot some stuff with the laser, we're always open to it.
Nice. Of course, I'll be there as well. So I look forward to the happy hour for sure. And you mentioned before, there's obviously other application areas that you operate in, whether that's mining or whatever it might be. How much potential do you see in battery, and how much of your focus is going to be in this space? We
are estimating that, by this time next year, more than 50% of our business will be going into the battery space. That's how much power we see as our tool providing into this space, and why we're putting so much energy and effort into it, is that it's a really obvious solution for problems that exist here, that couldn't have been more well suited for what we do and what we do really well. So we're really excited about it. The feedback that we keep getting from the marketplace has been really, exciting. So we're going to keep pushing into it, and we estimate that more than 50%. Yeah,
that's impressive. Because as well, before moving into batteries, I was in mining, and when you and I first spoke, I thought, well, that's a perfect application area for it as well. But it's good to hear that battery will accommodate a lot of your focus. This show, Take Charge, is all about shining a spotlight on people who are taking charge of issues in our industry, and I think this is a perfect example. You even sacrificed finishing your PhD to kind of get this off the ground and seize the opportunity. From whether that is a research and development or manufacturing perspective, it's going to save a lot of time and advance, or bring the timescales forward, hopefully, in terms of finding that next chemistry or whatever it might be. And I also found it very interesting how you're looking at the yield areas, and if that's going to save us lithium, which obviously is a precious resource, then of course that's amazing as well, because sourcing lithium is super harmful for the environment. So Jeff, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation. We've got one final question, which is from a former guest. You don't know who the guest is. I'd already generated it before. It might not be relevant for you, but I'll ask it anyway. How are you experiencing the investment landscape at the moment?
2023 was a rough time to raise money for kind of everybody, especially that we're looking more at the VC route of raising money. We were very lucky. And also, obviously we have good company. And so there was money to be raised there. So we were able to raise a Series A. But I don't think that was necessarily like the common story for probably the last 18 months. We are seeing that there are a lot of funds that have money to deploy now, for sure. They had kind of been holding the back, like a wait and see what happens sort of mentality in the capital landscape, but they have a mandate to invest that money. And so there is a lot of money that needs to be put into companies right now. Valuations are starting to go back up a bit. They're still not kind of crazy COVID numbers, thankfully. But we are starting to see that it's a lot better of a time to raise money, which feels really good. And I think that, gives a lot of entrepreneurs hope again, because, that is one of the biggest challenges is there's a ton of great companies and great technologies that die by the wrong timing. So I think that we're out of the worst of it from a funding perspective. At least on the US side of things. So I can't speak for Europe right now, but things seem to be going in a much better direction again.
That's good to hear. I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate that. Well, Jeff, thank you very much. And I think this episode will be released just before the battery show week. So I will see you there. And remind me your involvement there. You're going to have, you're sponsoring the Volta Foundation Happy Hour. And do you have a booth there yourself? Or
we don't have a booth there, so we're going to be part of at the Volta Lounge. We'll have a little pop-up there, and we're sponsoring the happy hour. So please come by, check us out, find more out about us, and we'd love to just talk about learning more about the battery space and how it can be a solution for you. We'll have a pretty large presence of our team there, so we'll be walking around. So if you see anybody with an Exum shirt, stop them.
Good stuff. Well, Jeff, thank you again for coming. I really enjoyed the conversation today, and I'll see you very soon.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you again.